So international rugby for 2025 has come to a close. The Springboks getting themselves the victory over Wales, 73 points to nil at the Principality Stadium. Now, unfortunately, in the closing moments of that contest, there was a substantial moment that slightly overshadowed what was a brilliant Springboks performance. But in this review, we'll be talking about what happened. But first of all, I do want to go into the positives from this game, as I've seen a huge amount of talk about the negatives from this matchup, but still the Springboks, outside of that, they did a lot of things right out there on the field. There were some brilliant solo performances and guys really putting their name in that hat for Rassi's squad in 2026, but we'll first of all list all of the try scorers. Hopefully you guys have got about a minute because there were quite a few in this matchup. Gerhard Stennekamp scored early on in the fixture. Now that was actually his first start for the Springboks, and once again we did see that scrum dominance come into play for the Boks throughout that first 40 minutes. Ethan Hooker, he did score his first try throughout the November internationals, but getting himself another one here. Jasper Visser, Morne Vandenberg, so they were the four try scorers in the first half. South Africa leading at halftime 28 points to nil, so already in firm control, and that was about what most people did expect for this matchup, the Boks to come out firing up against the inexperienced Welsh side. In the second half, we saw Wilco Low score himself the first try. So in both halves, it was actually a Springbok prop who scored the first try of the 40 minutes. Now, I don't think that's happened, or at least I can't think of a time that has happened in recent times. We then saw Sasha Feinberg Mngumezulu. He scored his first try in the 46th minute. Now, that was just after Tame Plumtree got himself a yellow card. Kane Moody scored. Andre Esterhuizen scored. So at this point in time, there were about 8 try scorers and no one had got themselves a double. Aaron Wainwright, he had a tough day at the office. He got eye poked by Tame Plumtree, who did get himself not yellow carded for that, but for something else. He then got himself a yellow card of his own, Wainwright. We saw Sasha score the double. Ruan Nokia scored, and then Eben Etzebeth, well, he scored the last try. And he has been talked about all around the world after this fixture came to a close, but it was not for that try. It was for the red card that happened 5 minutes later. But in terms of players who did step up throughout this contest, we did see Andre Esterhuizen get himself man of the match. Him in the starting lineup alongside Quaka Smith off of the bench really did bring that impact in those breakdowns. And we saw a huge amount more of Andre Esterhuizen at 12 than we did of Damien Dealindi in that number 13 jersey. I do think if there was one thing from this game that Rassi probably took from certain positions and certain selections, it would be as dangerous of a midfield combo as this seemed. I think we are better off seeing a Kane Moody or a Jesse Creel, Ethan Hooker, someone like that on the outside. It was possibly too much of a good thing in terms of that size and power, but Esterhuizen certainly stepping up. Ruan Nokia, he was phenomenal throughout this game, and that seems to be a sentence we're saying pretty much in every single Springbok review at this point in time. He just always finds a way of getting heavily involved. Scored himself the try in the 69th minute as well, which I think was thoroughly deserved for the amount of work he had done prior to that stage. We saw a big game from Jasper Visser, as you would always expect in this type of physical battle near the end of the season, and also Ethan Hooker. He started the match extremely well, but did kind of disappear a little bit in the second half. I was quite surprised to not see a huge amount of him throughout that second 40 minutes, but overall, still one of those really talented young prospects for the Springbok side. In terms of the Welsh players who did step up, there were a few who did stand just that little bit higher than the rest. I thought that Blair Murray was relatively strong at the back, actually having some very good runs from that 15 jersey. We hardly saw Rio Dyer, but we saw quite a bit of Ellis Mee. Now, outside of the aerial challenges, Mee was having a few good moments for the Welsh, but it seemed to be the high ball battle was going the way of the Boks, and even with a few handling errors along the way, they were still able to control the territory and possession throughout this game. I thought that Kieran Hardy, in the circumstances of this contest, going up against the world champions, he was also relatively solid out there on the field. But overall, I think that Wales, they look like a side that were ranked where they are. Plus, having those other players absent was always going to hurt them a little bit here too. But the Springboks, they were in the same boat. But as we know, Rassi's depth that he's been able to create throughout recent times has really made that less of a challenge when we do see those slightly more rotated Springbok starting sides. But nonetheless, we're going to talk about it. Like I said, there were actually plenty of positives to take from this contest up until those final couple moments. And unfortunately, that is the moment from this game that is going to always be remembered. Not the fact that the Springboks got themselves a massive win. 73 points to nil. It comes down to that red card, and there are a huge amount of eyes on what the outcome is going to be, no pun intended. But we could see Eben Etzebeth looking at a pretty substantial ban here because of what happened out there on the field. But pretty much to break it down, there was a bit of a scuffle near the end of the game. Now, there's all of these theories going around about who started it, who said what, and at the moment, until anything does get fully specified, there's not too much point trying to break it down and all those little moments that did take place. It was between Alex Mann and Eben Etzebeth, though. Seemed to be a bit of something going on the ground. Some saying that Alex Mann started it by putting his hands near Eben Etzebeth's face. Now, whether or not there was any contact with eyeballs or a punch or anything like that thrown is still to be determined, but from there, the players got back up to their feet. Eben Etzebeth, extended hand, and I'll be honest, the slow motion replay from a neutral perspective, it didn't do Etzebeth any favours. It did look very ugly. Now, some are saying he tried to pull out of it, but I do believe that was once the thumb was slightly in the socket of Alex Mann. Now, I think the most important thing from this whole situation, as ugly as it looked, is the fact that Alex Mann, by the sounds of it, his eye is okay, because that's the last thing that you want in these type of scenarios. If there is any sort of altercation out there on the field, at the end of the day, these guys are professional athletes. They will go out there, put their bodies on the line. But at the end of the day, you still want everyone leaving the field on their own accord and not having any sort of serious long-term damage from a match of rugby. So by the sounds of it, Alex Mann is all right, so that is great. And that may actually help Eben Etzebeth in his hearing with World Rugby. He may be able to argue that the contact was not as bad as it did first look. But yeah, like I said, slow motion, it looked ugly for Eben Etzebeth, and it just seemed to be one of those moments that could have been avoided in this matchup. 78 minutes through, and a 73-0 victory over the Welsh. You know, you go 1 or 2 more minutes, and it's the end of the game. And people talk about how great of a performance this was from the Springboks, but now in a rugby fan base that is already so divided due to controversies throughout this year, it's just a shame that we've got another one on top of that. I've seen people defending Etzebeth. I've seen people throwing the book at him and saying that he won't get to play rugby for the Springboks again. The minimum for an eye gouge looks like 12 weeks, so that is quite a lengthy ban. The longest that it can be is about 200 weeks, but I don't think we're going to end up seeing that. And as much of a physical individual as Eben Etzebeth is, as we know, he likes to enforce that physicality out on the field, but he hasn't actually got the worst disciplinary record. So I'm very curious to see what way they go with the judgment of this call, whether or not they do say we're going to give you a pretty strict ban, or maybe because he hasn't had a huge amount of circumstances like that before, they may go slightly lighter. Once again, it is all just speculation at this point in time, but I feel like as much as it was a substantial moment in this game, there were still a lot of positives that came from this matchup as well. But like I said, as we know, the negatives will always outshine the positives when it comes to this matchup. But overall, up until that point, there is absolutely no denying the Springbok side are looking phenomenal at this point in time. But I do want to know what you guys think of the match as well as that situation at the end. If you are new to the channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, as we have got a Rugby World Cup draw just around the corner taking place too. But thank you all very much for tuning in, and I will see you all for the next one.